What is your most horrifying, I thought no one was looking moment? Took a crap in the bathroom in a school building I was studying in at 2 a.m. I felt a bit hot and debated whether I should do it. I thought aloud in a hymn, "Oh, sensation, sensation, does thou dare aboard the M station? Cruel creation only for your relation." I say this a lot when I think by myself and I'm getting ready to do it. After a few seconds, I started doing it screaming. That's when I heard a toilet flush a few stalls down. I subsequently slapped myself in the face out of shame of my craziness. I would just melt into the toilet and then flush myself. Story 2. More something I said. I was walking down the hallway of my school. I proceeded to walk up the stairs, and with my arm full of books, for some reason I thought my body could handle the simple task of stairs, considering I'd been on them my entire life. I was wrong, of course, and my left foot caught in the staircase. I collapsed to the ground, face planting into a stair. My books exploded and scattered everywhere. I just looked up and screamed, "Can!" Then I saw an elderly professor staring down at me. He made a remark about noise in the hallway and smirked. Wrinkly schmuck didn't even help me. Story 3. When I first started working in New York City, I lived in Long Island and in nearly a 2-hour door-to-door commute via the Long Island Railroad. One night on the later train, I managed to grab a great seat, only to have them pull the train out of service and ask that we switch to a new train. For those that don't know, this is BS because now all the people that were late and forced to stand have the advantage of exiting first and getting to the new train for a seat. I got off and knew I had no shot at a seat as I was behind hundreds of people going up the escalator. Noticed that the down escalator was totally empty and decided to go for it. Ran my bum off to get to the top, took my final leap and came up short. Hit the deck flat on my face. Humiliated, I got back up and ran to the train. Got myself a seat too. Well, at least you got yourself a seat. Story 4. I have this weird condition where I suddenly yell out random things when I think no one is looking. It is not a tic, as I obviously have full control of it and do not feel particularly compelled to yell out things if it is near people. But whenever I'm alone in the car, walking somewhere, etc., I sometimes yell random stuff really loudly. I've always been this way. I interned at a hedge fund last summer. The company was located in the second floor of a building that had an unoccupied first floor. Every floor had a really nice restroom, but I quickly found out that there was an unmarked door that led to a restroom with a lot of stalls on the first floor that no one went to. I used to take great pleasure in taking long, luxurious craps down there. And whenever I walked into the secret restroom of joy, I would yell out, "Captain Crapstorm, reporting for duty!" and proceed to take an amazing crap. Well, one day, as I yelled those words and walked in, I saw a pair of women's legs in one of the stalls in the restroom that I thought no one knew about but me. It turns out that all the female interns from my hedge fund, only a handful and very attractive, went down there to take care of their business. And that was the second time one of them heard my pre-crap yelling ritual. It was probably the most awkward and cringeworthy day of my life. Ugh, another one. Story 5. I used to work at a Starbucks. We had this massive pair of tongs used for pulling paninis out of the oven. One closing shift, I had the brilliant idea of mimicking Pac-Man. I then proceeded to clap said tongs in front of my face while chanting, "Waka waka waka waka." And walking out onto what I thought was a completely empty sales floor, I was greeted by all the members of my new boyfriend's family. I froze. They were blankly staring at me. Awesome first impression. If I was part of his family, I would have liked you instantly. Story 6. I was in the park a few weeks ago and noticed a mini tornado or whirlwind nearby that was about 10 feet wide, whipping garbage and leaves around in a perfect circle. As it moved closer, I held my ground, and soon I was in the exact eye of the storm with flying debris circling around me. Accordingly, I clenched my fists and raised them to around chest level and looked to the sky with eyes squinting through dust and wind and let out a mighty extended roar to fully emphasize my powerful wizarding weather summoning skills. It was exhilarating. At least 5 people probably saw me, but I was unconcerned as they were mere mortals. Walked away like a boss as if it was nothing more than a morning stretch. I've never heard the phrase "like a boss" used in a sense since like 2012 or something. Story 7. Well, mine wasn't that nobody was looking, but that the wrong person was looking. Freshman year in college, I was in the dorms and I had a pretty goofy relationship with my roommate at the time. I heard as he entered the door, so I decided to do something funny, so I stood up in the center of her room and put my hand in my pants. I closed my eyes, headbanged, and waved my other hand wildly in the air. I heard the door swing open and I just went for it, shaking my head and both my arms in exaggerated fashions. When I opened my eyes to see his expression, I realized I was staring into the eyes of my roommate's father, whom I had not met yet. He was helping my roommate carry some groceries in from the car. Oh wow. Story 8. When I was a stupid 13-year-old, I was always coming up with inventive ways to prepare for kissing a girl. I tried kissing magazine pictures, awful, and the mirror, even worse, and a balloon. Seriously, don't bother. but I still felt woefully unprepared. One day I was at a department store and I saw a shapely half mannequin that was sequestered away from the general public, and I thought I would give it a shot. Had to be better than a balloon, right? Not so much. I guess mannequins aren't cleaned regularly because when I pecked it on the lips, the funky smell and oily film hit me like a brick. That brought me to my senses and I turned to leave. I had to find a water source to clean whatever filth I just touched my mouth to. That's when I heard the bizzed sound of servo motors and looked up at the security camera zooming in on me. Smile for the camera. Story 9. In college, I lived with 2 roommates in my second year. One weekend, they both went away back to their hometown, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to have my then-girlfriend over for some fun, sexy times without volume restraint. Saturday morning, we got it again right after getting up, and afterwards, I excused myself to go get some water. I walked out of my room and to the end of the bedroom hallway. When I opened my door, one of my roommates was standing there, about to light a cigarette. Inside, strictly verboten amongst us, we both just froze. We were staring at each other. Me, him with a cigarette hanging from his mouth, a lit match burning in his hand right next to the cigarette. I wheeled around after what seemed like forever and walked back into the bedroom where I fell over laughing. Story 10. A couple years ago, I was dating this guy that I had met on the internet who lived 5 hours away. We didn't get to see each other often, so we would webcam during periods we couldn't be together. I had a roommate at the time and she had just left for work while I was on the webcam with him. For some reason, my ex and I always turned on songs and would groove to them while on cam, so on this particular day, I turned on Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. I ended up dancing around my room, swinging my shirt around. Suddenly, I hear my roommate laughing her bum off because she had come back home to get her name tag. Now, anytime that song comes on, she says, "Please leave your shirt on." Story 11. I went to college about 4 hours from home. I was coming home for spring break one year. The Rents live in a rural area, and about the last 45 minutes of the trip, there was no place to stop and take a bio break. I didn't have to go at the last opportunity, so I drove right on by. I was about 20 minutes from home and felt the turd drop into the chamber. This wasn't a raggy moment right away. I felt I could hold it until I got home. It would only be about 20 more minutes. All was well. And as I approached home, I thought of the psychological fact of, yes, I made it. Set in, and the last mile of my trip was sheer panic. But alas, this is not a tale of me crabbing myself. This is a tale of not expecting anyone to be home. I made it in the front door, and as I was clinching the Bombay doors tightly, I started singing a little tune to take my mind off the torpedo that was good to go and ready to launch. Gonna crap in my pants, gonna crap in my pants, gonna crap in my pants. Over and over again. Walked into the kitchen and saw one of my mom's best friends who was there for a visit. Unbeknownst to me, Mom was at work. Horrified, I immediately changed my tune and played it off like I was just lazily singing some random tune. That was really catchy. Story 12. I was at the Metrodome for a Twins game. I developed a severe case of itchy bum, and it soon became clear that a booster wipe was imperative. Left the game and stood in a long line for stalls. When it was finally my turn, the large handicapped stall with a double-wide door was the one available. When I got in, I had some difficulty with a broken locking mechanism, but soon it got to seemingly latch. I then went to town on my itchy bum, facing the toilet so it would seem like I was taking a leak. I wiped once, and again, and a third time till it came back white. I threw the final tissue in the toilet, pulled up my pants, zipped, and flushed. Finally turning around to leave the stall, only to see 20-plus very uncomfortable-looking men doing their best to avoid any eye contact with me. The stall door had silently swung wide open behind me. My shame laid bare for all the world to see. I wanted to make a beeline from the bathroom, but in light of what I had just been doing, and the fact that everyone knew it, that just wasn't an option. So head down, I darted to the sink, washed my hands, and got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. I've never been so simultaneously embarrassed and amused at the same time. Despite my mortification, it was just too funny for me not to share. I bring down the house every time I tell this story. I would just disappear, man. Story 13. Oh God, here goes. Two-part story starts with a whole day trip with my dad and a couple of his friends. After eating a couple of burgers my dad made, I got a massive case of diarrhea. I went into the woods to hide in a couple of trees. No biggie, I thought, after evacuating an ungodly amount of crap. Later that day on the ride home, it happens again. Holy crap juice. My insides are turning. I'm trying to concentrate. It's 15 more minutes to home. We finally make it, and as I take that final leap out of the car, I accidentally crap myself in front of all my dad's friends. They, being the outstanding gentlemen that they were, decided to go get a couple of beers while I sorted my crap-covered self out. So here I am, taking a shower to get myself clean after the horrible incident and start to sing in the shower. I'm singing the Rocky theme at full power. Do-do-do, do-do-do. finish my shower and say, screw it, no one's home. So I walk out while doing the Rocky theme and air punching like there's no tomorrow. Walk across the living room and I feel a presence. My dad and all his friends staring at me. What the heck faces all around? Not a proud moment. Story 14. My grandmother used to run estate sales for people who didn't know what to price things at and for people who were still grieving and couldn't be bothered. I always came to help out at her estate sales because it was fun to jack around with some random people's old stuff. The one time, when I was like 17, I was super spiked hanging out at some dude's house when I found a pump, a fella, by the way, and I thought, oh, what the heck, and started to pump myself for man milk. Not 10 seconds later, a shirt over the back of my neck and hooked up to a pump, my grandmother does this, and not a word of it was ever spoken of again. Wait, what happened? Story 15. During junior high, 7th to 9th grade, I wore those laceless shoes that had the 2 elastic strips that held them on your foot. When I was in the bathroom washing my hands, one of my friends told me that kid, every class, has one extraordinarily mentally challenged kid who somehow doesn't end up in the special ed class. This was him, had the exact same shoes as me, and that he was currently in one of the stalls. Out of curiosity, I ducked down quickly to look at the shoes and confirm my friend's claim. At that exact moment, the geology teacher, whose class I was going to next, walked into the bathroom and saw me during that half a second I was ducked down looking at the kid's shoes. The next hour of class was horrible. The teacher didn't like me in the first place and kept making semi-homosexual remarks with regards to anything I did. When I was walking up to return a test sheet that period, I dropped it and had to pick it up. When I went down to pick it up, he said something like, "Hey, I don't want you looking at any more garments while you're down there, like you do in the men's restrooms. You'd better stand up quickly." I think that moment in the bathroom, along with all the ramifications it entails, makes it my most horrifying I thought nobody was looking moment. Kind of mentally scarring for a 13-year-old. What'd you think was going to happen? Story 16. When I was 13 or 14, I was caught in bed with my girlfriend at the same age, by her father. We were at her place, in her room, and he wouldn't usually get home until 5 or 6, so we had a couple of hours to go. He opens the door with a smirk on his face and says, "You two should probably get dressed and come downstairs." So, I got dressed and ran out of the seldom-used front door, biking to a friend's house. By the time I got home, he had gone to my parents' house and had a talk with him. My parents confronted me and I was embarrassed, so I lied, saying that it wasn't what it looked like. I wasn't allowed at their house anymore. Story 17. So this one time, it was really early in the morning, like before there's even a line at the Timmy's. I was walking across the bridge at Quebec and I didn't see a person or car in front of me. I felt a rumble where I kept fresh beer, which told me a huge fart just put on its blinker and was looking for an exit. I thought to myself, hey, it's really early, why not give this blast some thrust on the way out? And I really freaking pushed. So loud I could hear it over my headphones. So loud it made me laugh. All of a sudden I got real self-conscious, like maybe somebody's behind me. I turned around and see a total babe walk past real fast, holding her breath. And I just kept laughing. I must have thought I was crazy. Story 18. I was the someone who was looking. Once. There's an ice cream shop down the road from my place. The girlfriend and I were walking past and I noticed that there were no customers inside. And the lone employee, a teenage guy, was inside balancing his baseball cap with its visor on his chin. I stopped and pointed it out to my girlfriend and we watched through the window as he successfully balanced it for another 2 minutes. It finally fell, I turned and noticed us golf clapping for him in the street and he turned bright red. I think he was really embarrassed, but he shouldn't have been. It was awesome. Story 19. I live in Sweden, and we do have snow in the winter, as you know. A couple of years ago when I was living with my parents, I had my own little cabin, with no toilet. Anyway, since I couldn't really go anywhere without plowing snow, I just opened the door, stood there on my little porch with my thing over the railing and whizzed. I used to do this for quite some time until my neighbor walks by and sees me standing there with my thing over the railing, kind of bending backwards. What are you gonna do? She's already seen me. She walked by and stared at me. Also, when I got aware of this, I think my neighbor saw me a couple of times. They had a house like 3 houses from ours with a window upstairs towards my cabin. They must have. Story 20. Didn't think no one was looking, but misjudged who was looking. Was filming in a building downtown. Our site rep for the building was kind of a crazy job. I had to use the regular passenger elevator for moving equipment up because the cargo elevator was being serviced that morning. On one of my buddy's trips up to the set, we were addressing the elevator doors opened up to the site rep, doing bad karate moves towards him as a joke. A really weird joke that lasted a good 10 awkward seconds for my buddy. Anyway, that became the joke of the day. Anytime the door would open, one of us would be waiting there doing bad karate moves towards each other. On one of my trips back to the truck, I saw the cargo elevator moving and 2 sets of legs along with it. Figuring it had been repaired and my 2 buddies were riding it down, I immediately went into exaggerated karate mode. It was then I realized that it was not, in fact, my two pals who I had been sharing the joke with all day, but the two elevator repair guys testing the cargo elevator. They looked extremely confused as to why I was practicing karate moves in front of a cargo elevator alone while staring at them. I didn't say a word, stopped, turned, and walked away. Story 21. The scene. A somewhat crowded shopping center. Her, a gorgeous and extremely fit young lady, is walking in front of me and my friend. Us. Two extremely stimulated Iranian boys. There's a reason there's a stereotype they were sleazy club owners. What happened? My friend turns to me and Farzi begins to outline in disgusting detail all the things he wants to do to her. Even for someone who lives in my level of deprivation, it was a truly incredible bacchanalian description. Not to be outdone, I begin to outline my own plan for this attractive young lady and, in turn, create a scenario that would make the Marquis de Sade blush. Just as I finish, this amazing-looking girl turns around and begins to lambaste us in perfect Farsi. Not only had she heard what we had said, but she proceeded to tell us why she would never engage in anything with two pathetic, desperate, and creepy-looking Iranian guys who would stalk behind her. It was a humbling experience that led to significant self-betterment in the long term. Story 22. When I was a teenager and my parents were away for the weekend, I decided that it would of course be the perfect opportunity for a self-extravaganza. I got hold of some corn and set myself up nicely in the living room with the normal accoutrements. After having a great first, I was ready for another go. Cue furious and almost violent tugging, legs akimbo. Some really uninhibited crap. And then, on looking slightly to the right of the TV, I see movement in the door. After quickly putting my thing away and muting the various sounds coming from the TV, I spring to my feet and cautiously make my way to the door, in time to glimpse the fleeing back of what appears to be a young child exiting our driveway. I believe they may have been selling chocolates or some other school fundraising effort. Since then, I've been sure to keep my session within reasonable limits and out of public view. Why were you in public view in the first place? Story 23. I'm sure everyone has done this before, but when I was like 10 years old, I was at a ranch out in the woods, basically a resort in the woods, but it was small. Either way, everyone would eat at the same time, then would all go and play by the pool or campfire. There would be about 50 of us. Well, one night, after dinner, 10-year-old me went up exploring and went up to the dining room. I was completely alone and I had to fart, so I decided I would glorify it. I kid you not. I stood up on a chair, lifted my leg to as much of a 90-degree angle I could make, and let it fly. I turned around and there's two of the table washers just staring at me. I turned a red that matched the color of their cleaning bucket. Happened on day 2 of 7. I stayed by the campfire from then on. Also that moment when I found out they actually watch you in dressing rooms. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 24. Growing up, my friends and I used to play ghetto baseball. Wiffle ball bats stuffed with newspaper and duct taped and tennis ball, at the common grassy area by my friends' houses. Being around 13 years old and no washroom around, I used to whiz in these bushes that were next to a house where this mean lady lived. No issues, whatever. This lady sucked anyway. Screw her bushes. I moved to a neighboring town and now I'm in high school where I met this girl at a party and we started dating. I get invited for dinner at her house, and of course, it's the house that I used to whiz on where the old lady lived. I laugh to myself and go inside to meet the family over dinner. In the middle of dinner, the older sister goes, "Holy crap, I knew you looked familiar." I stopped chewing, thinking, what the heck? You're the kid that used to whiz in the bushes all the time. I sat there poker-faced thinking no freaking way. They didn't live there when I did this, but how? Wait, no, how could you possibly know? Then my own freaking girlfriend chimes in, "Oh my god, older sister, you're right, he is. We have just lost cabin pressure." Apparently the old lady moved or passed away or something, and unknowingly to me, my now girlfriend's family had moved in. At this point, I'm about to just excuse myself and go pass away under a rock somewhere, and her ultra-cool father steps in and while laughing says, "Well, tonight, son, you don't have to use the bushes. You have several bathrooms for you to choose from." Dinner was still a little awkward, but I survived and was invited back. Of course, I would get a good ribbing every time I would use the restroom, but I went with it because I was with their daughter. I love the Fight Club reference. Story 25. So a few weeks ago, me and my friends were playing 3 versus 3 basketball in my house with 2 teams of 5. About 30 or so minutes in, I really had to go to the bathroom, so I called time out and switched with someone who wasn't playing. At that point, I couldn't go to the bathroom in my house because, frankly, I couldn't hold it much longer. I ran around to the other side of the house and proceeded to do my thing into a pot with some flowers that I normally use when I'm outside. I can't hold it in long enough to rush inside. As I looked up after I was finished, I hadn't looked up the entire time, I saw my mom staring at me. All she said to me was, Watering the flowers too much isn't good for them. Mom is a comedian. Story 26. New girlfriend. Haven't really met her mom yet. I was invited over to her house. Girlfriend answered the door. I gave her a hug and told her I needed to use the washroom really quick. She pointed me to the washroom and I closed the door. For some reason, I was self-conscious that her and her mom could hear me whizzing, so I crouched down on my knees and aimed to whiz directly into the side of the bowl. Her mother comes downstairs and goes right for the washroom, not knowing I've arrived yet. She opens the door and sees me crouched in front of the toilet with my thing in my hand and immediately slams the door shut. It was awkward for a while after that. They even made fun of me for it. God only knows what they thought I was doing. Story 27. This happened a couple of years ago when I was working at my old job. It was a Friday afternoon and the showroom had been super quiet all day. I was the only one there. One of the sales reps phoned me around 2 p.m. to tell me that a client and a designer would be dropping by sometime in the afternoon. Could I please let them in and show them some samples? Okay, no problem. 3 p.m. came and then it was 4 p.m. No phone calls, no client visits, nothing. Normally, I would leave at 4 on Friday, but I decided I'd better stay until 5, albeit rather grudgingly. At 4:45, I figured that these people weren't coming, so I began shutting down the showroom and packing my stuff to leave. Then at 4:55, the doorbell rang. I figured that if I let them in, I'd be there until 6 or 6:30, and I really just wanted to get out there and start my weekend. So I didn't answer the door. I figured that I'd wait a few minutes, they'd go away, and I'd be able to leave. The only thing was that the door was surrounded by giant floor-to-ceiling windows, so I couldn't move around in the office or showroom without being caught. After a few minutes, the doorbell rang again. 4:58. I was definitely not answering the door. I thought that in order to be safe, I should wait until 5:05 before trying to leave, just to make sure. At 5:05, I decided to get down on my stomach and peek around a cupboard at the door or window area to make sure the coast was clear. It wasn't. The client and his designer were standing there at the door, looking in through the window, and they saw my head peeking out from behind the cupboard. I know they saw me because they waved at me. So I had to get up and go answer the door and try to explain that I didn't hear the doorbell. Both times. And failed at making up some reason why I was on the floor. I don't think they believed me. And they stayed until 6:30 looking at samples. I felt like an idiot the whole time. Yeah, you kind of were. Story 28. I doubt anybody will see this down here, but anyways, I'll go ahead and tell it. Sophomore year of college, I was on the rowing team. The weather wasn't yet warm enough to be on the water, so we were inside in the ergs, rowing machines. We had some hard workouts. I can't quite remember what, but it was an interval workout with 3 minutes on and 2 minutes off for 25 minutes or something along those lines. The point is that it was intense. More intense than normal. The intenseness of the workout was making me have to fart, but the constant use of my leg or abdominal muscles prevented me from letting them out. So after the 25 minutes, we have a 5-minute break before the next 25-minute piece, and I go over to the water fountain to get a drink. I had my music blasting and was exhausted, so I didn't really notice my surroundings at all. I just took a quick glance around before bending down to drink. While I was drinking, all the gas that had built up came to a head and was ready to burst. Still bent over and drinking, I let it rip. I swear, it was the loudest, largest volume fart I had ever expelled in my entire life. I have still yet to top it. The force of my cheeks vibrating was violent enough to the point that it made my back sore afterwards. It was a full second. Seriously, say 1001. That's how long. Of absolute maximum flatulent thrust. I felt like I had expelled my entire lung capacity out of my back. Feeling rather pleased with myself, I stood up and turned to go back to the ergs. To my horror, standing directly behind me, seriously, not more than a foot from my back, was a girl waiting to drink. She didn't look up, she didn't move in any way, and her facial expression was completely frozen with her mouth wide open, eyes staring at where my back had been. I quickly shuffled away and looked behind me after walking about 50 feet, and she still hadn't moved. I spent the rest of the next piece bursting into random fits of giggles. It became a bit of a team joke. To this day, I'll sometimes think about it and burst out laughing. I also giggle at the fact that she may have seen who I was before standing behind me, and every time she sees me on campus, all she can think about is that one scarring moment in her life. She definitely wrote that in her journal that day. Story 29. When I was in middle school, my friend and I used to whiz all over the bathroom floors. We sort of became notorious around the school, as the principals and administration were basically playing detectives trying to figure out who was constantly whizzing on the floors for the janitors to clean up. One day, my friend and I were both doing our routine, draining our things together, just spraying everywhere we could that wasn't the stall, when one of the old fat janitors walked in on us out full-on whizzing. Now, the way we were positioned was such that my friend had time to see the janitor walk in and pull his pants up without having the janitor see him. I, however, was in the worst position possible. I remember turning around and only seeing the janitor looking at me with my thing hanging as whiz was pouring out. My friend had completely bailed, never to get a punishment. The janitor then said, "Come with me." I said, "What did I do?" I ended up getting 3 days out of school suspension. Needless to say, I haven't whizzed in a bathroom floor since. Story 30. Several years ago, I was working as a nurse at a local nursing home. Nurses were required to wear white pants so that we were identifiable from the other employees and nurses' aides. Now, on this particular day, I had been very busy before going into work in the evening and had hastily dressed for my shift. I had a resident that was in hospice care and expected to pass away very soon. All of his family, about 15 people, were in his room with him. I went in to assess him, check vitals, and provide some basic comfort care. After a bit of work, I noticed it had become very quiet in the living room, and finally someone asked me, "So, you like football, huh?" I thought it was quite an odd question, but answered anyway with, it's okay." Then someone told me that according to my garments, I loved football. I then remembered that I had taken a pair of my daughter's garments out of the dryer earlier that day and worn them. They were red and white, striped with, "I love football" on the back. The whole room had a great laugh while I turned various shades of red. Afterward, they told me that they had been so tense with the predicament of waiting for their loved one to pass away that the laughter I unwittingly provided really helped them a lot. I have never forgotten to wear plain tan garments under my white pants again. Story 31. I took a seat in the bare ceramic throne surrounded by 3 green stall walls in the bathroom of my school's library. I released a stream of horrid brown mess into the white, water-filled bowl. My intestines granted me a brief respite. I assessed that the time was right for an intermission wipe and courtesy flush. So I make myself a thrice-folded rectangle of white sanitary paper and I wipe. It glides over the layer of filth coated to my back crack, but manages to scrape off at least a bit. For some reason, I take it out of the bowl to examine it. In case there was a problem. There wasn't a problem until I dropped it. Even then, there wasn't a problem until it floated face down under the stall and onto the sandaled foot of the young man in that neighboring green cubicle. All was quiet. Story 32. A couple years ago, Burning Man. While running around one night wearing a pink bodysuit, knee-high boots, and giant afro wig, I decided to eat some substance. The pill kicked in, and as I was walking back into the camp, and I thought it'd be funny if I let out a fart in front of a few of my campmates. Now, it is a stimulant, which therefore loosens everything up inside you, so I wind up not just farting, but also blowing a considerable load of shiza into my jumpsuit. I'm like, well, crap. So I grab a beer and a flashlight and do that awful waddle walk a couple 100 yards down to the porta potties to go try to remedy the situation. I sit down in the porta potty, put my beer in the toilet paper dispenser, pull down the jumpsuit, assess the damage, and luckily, the mess has all been more or less contained within the leg bands of my garments. But in order to get them off, I'm going to have to untie my giant knee-high boots and pull the whole jumpsuit off, in the tight constraints of the porta potty, in the dark, while this does not sound appealing to me. So, I decide I'm going to rip my garments off. So I start tugging at the waistband, trying to tear it. It's not freaking tearing. So I find a clean spot on it, lean way down, and start trying to gnaw through the waistband of my garments. Just then, the door opens, and there's this girl outside shining a headlamp into the porta potty and sees this unholy sight before her. She screams out this, "Ah!" Slams the door, causing the beer to fall off the toilet paper dispenser and spill into my wig. And from outside, she's still screaming, and I can hear some girl with her saying, "What is it? What's in there?" Headlamp girl is shrieking, I don't know. The first thing that comes to my mind to say is, "There's a person in here. I'm just a person. I'm not doing anything weird." It was a while before I came out of that porta potty. I think some integral part of my being might still be there. Story 33. I was in 2nd grade. I'd been talking to a friend in class so relentlessly and generally being distracted from my work to the extent that the teacher moved my desk to the far upper corner of the classroom, several feet away from the rest of the group of desks. I was sort of in front of the class, facing away from them all toward the front of the classroom. Well, we were having our lesson, and I felt that I was off to the side and out of attention range enough to pick my nose. I began digging away and pulled out what I assumed to be a harmless small booger. Well, what I pulled upon turned out to be a seemingly endless and considerable, thick, several-inch-long cord of super snot. A good 7 inches or so if it had been pulled from my nose before I realized it, and now I was panicking. Hand over my face, trying to figure out what I could possibly do to dispose of, discreetly, no less, this amazing snot monster. Just then, to my great horror, the teacher called on me to answer a question. Nearly every kid in the class and the teacher now had their eyes on me. I'm sitting there still cupping my hand full of snot in front of my face, desperately trying to hide the anaconda of mucus that is still protruding from my nostril. Red in the face, all I could do was respond with, "I have to blow my nose." The teacher responded to this with, "Blow my nose isn't the answer." She asked me to remove my hand from in front of my face, and I responded with, "I can't. I have to blow my nose." The entire class erupted into laughter, and I was graciously allowed to leave my seat to retrieve a tissue, with everyone watching. Well, at least they didn't see the snot monster. Story 34. I wasn't really caught doing anything. I used to work in the produce section of a grocery store and would have to go in at 5 a.m. to cut up fruit trays and such so that they were in the store early. The night before, I drank a bunch of Bud Lime Light and ate a lot of greasy pizza, which created a vortex of nastiness inside me. Well, I woke up, showered, and on my way to work, I felt some extreme movements. I went to the employee bathroom in the back of the store and unleashed a demon baby and stank up the bathroom. I washed my hands, pretty much laughing at the smell, opened the door, and the cute girl from the bakery, who starts working at 4 a.m., was waiting outside the door. I walked away and knew that her time spent in the bathroom wasn't pleasant and that she would continue to never talk to me. Story 35. Mine happened in a mission trip to India in college. Our entire group had been struck with a relentless bout of violent, explosive. I remember being soundly asleep one night when my gut started bubbling. I lay in my sleeping bag, sure that the urge could wait till morning, but my bowels had other plans, and it was soon evident that holding it simply would not do. The outhouse of a rural village was located a few hundred yards away in the brush. I would have to make a run for it. As I scurried into the darkness of the early morning, it became painfully obvious that my sphincter was no match for the unholy force brewing within me. I peeled away from the path and climbed to the backside of a small hill. Satisfied that this spot was sufficiently secluded, I prepared to unleash the typhoon. It felt like someone had shoved a fire hose into my mouth and was purging me through my back. The sound of my bum flapping in the breeze rang through the still air like a trumpet heralding the victorious escape of whatever foul beast had infected my gut. My eyes closed and my head fell back in sweet relief. And it was at that moment. The sun peeked over the horizon. It washed over me and suddenly I could see everything. Unfortunately, what I saw was that the side of the hill I had chosen to squat on was directly facing the camp where the women were staying. 2 little Indian ladies and 3 of the girls from our group were out washing morning dishes. They stared open-mouthed as I squatted, gilded and immortalized in the light of the rising sun, looking over my shoulder at them. Story 36. Nobody will ever read this, but here it goes. It was my junior year of high school. Every year at my school, the junior class goes on a mountain hiking trip, aptly named Junior Mountain Trip. So it was the second day of trekking up rocky trails in the woods. As one might imagine, the physical activity coupled with the fibrous diet of the day before had loosened my bowels quite a lot. So we were setting up camp for the second night when my stomach started to really hurt. I felt dizzy and I sweated profusely. It was near dinner time and I had to finally excuse myself. I took with me the ration toilet paper and the trowel to dig the hole. Much to my dismay, the area where we made camp was surrounded by really thick foliage and I couldn't find much of a place to properly conceal myself. So I walked down the trail, turned a corner where I would be hidden from the group. The horde was at the gate, so to speak. I couldn't wait any longer, so there was a small log that was in the middle of the path and I figured that would be a decent place to sit. I took the trowel and tried to dig a hole, but the dirt in the trail was hard-packed and I barely made a dent. I said screw it, dropped my pants and released the kraken. It was an enormous relief. The problem was, it had taken a long time and dinner was ready and one of the guides came looking for me. Unfortunately, she happened to be extremely good looking. She came down the path to find me crouching right in the middle of the trail taking a massive crap. The best thing I could do was wave to her and look away. She knew what was up, so she turned right around back to the group. I came out of it all right, covered it with a little dirt and went back to the group for dinner. Unfortunately, the next day when we broke camp, I asked one of the guides which way we were going to be heading. He pointed down the same path I'd gone the night before, so we were heading down as a group and the whole group had to pass my huge festering pile of dirt-covered crap. It was brutal. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.